Well, a pleasant good Monday morning to each and every one of you. Hello again, and welcome to Dialed In. I'm Tom Brenneman. Great to have you with us. Another beautiful day here in Hamilton, Ohio. It's a pleasure to be joined in here today by our producer, Casey McAllister.
How's it going, Tom?
Doing fine. How are you?
Doing great.
And even Luke Brenneman is here after handling the move that microphone. That's part of this job, is you have to get the microphone close to your mouth. Does that make sense?
Understood.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You doing all right?
Hanging in there.
Good weekend. You enjoyed the Clover Nook Open. You, Casey, you and I, and Luke, and a lot of the gang out there on Friday.
Good time. There's some elite golf on display at Clover Nook Country Club.
It was.
Willie Mack the third. Willie Mack the third.
Willie Mack the third. And the next day he was on his way to Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
Trying to, what was he trying to get into? The USGA, I think he said it was.
I thought it had something to do with Korn Ferry's status, but
Oh, did it? Okay.
he's also playing in those, U.S. Open qualifiers like a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. Including the guy who was our host out there for the tournament over the weekend, David Wettering. He fired a 66 in the first round of the qualifier for the U.S. Open. He will play in Springfield, Ohio next week. Anyway, if you weren't with us, it was a great time. We really enjoyed it. But back to Dialed In. We come your way twice a week, live on Mondays at 9:15 a.m., and then we will post later that day on the Believe Network. Fridays, we're both on Believe and Chatterbox. Chatterbox on Friday, sports, we're live at 12, right after Off the Bench. And that's coming up today at 10. You can join us on YouTube/Chatterbox Sports page. You can download us anywhere, anytime. Just search Dialed In with Tom Brenneman, and you're dialed in. You can also follow us on X at Tom Brenneman TV. Great to have you with us. All right. We're 40 games into a 162-game schedule. And a lot of people are ready to throw in the towel. At least that's what I continue to hear kind of everywhere I go. Bouncing into UDF, or the grocery store, or the gas station, or wherever it might be. And these aren't knee-jerk fans. I mean, these are people who know baseball and know the Reds. 17-23, 40 games in. They ended an 8-game losing streak on Friday night in San Francisco, then lost the next 2 games. So that's 13 losses in their last 16 games since April the 24th. And here we are on May the 13th. They've won 3 times. Now, be honest. How many of you out there were ready to crown them champions of the Central Division when they were 14-10? There are a lot of you out there. I mean, you were talking about Steer and De La Cruz and all these guys going to the Hall of Fame. 14-10. And now they've won 3 times and lost 13 since. You ready to kick them to the curb just 3 weeks later? Well, after yesterday's loss to the Giants, it's now off to Arizona for the first of 3 tonight against the defending National League champions. You know, I keep hearing all this stuff and reading all this stuff about the rugged National League West. Give me a break. The NL West has 1 team over 500. 1. Now, I'm not suggesting that Arizona's not going to be better down the road. But the only reason these teams are even within a game or 2 or 3 of 500 is because they've played the Reds. And they haven't even played the Dodgers yet. That's later this week. Lefty Jordan Montgomery gets a start tonight for AZ. Graham Ashcraft for Cincinnati. First pitch 9:40. The Reds are currently in 4th place behind Milwaukee, Chicago, and yes, Pittsburgh. Casey, run that up. I don't want to hear again, and I hear it from people all the time. I never want to hear again Reds fans looking down their noses at Pittsburgh anymore. I don't want to hear about it. Just because the Reds have an incredible history, Pirates have a pretty damn good history too. Reds haven't won a playoff series since 1995. So I don't want to hear any more about, it's the Pirates, the lowly Pirates. Football news, social media ablaze, Casey. You were taking part in all this nonsense. Luke probably was too. That the Bengals were going to be the NFL season opener at Kansas City this year.
I mean, it just makes sense. It makes sense to do that, but I mean, I don't get paid the big bucks to make those decisions, so I guess that's why it didn't happen. I mean, I guess they think the Ravens versus the Chiefs is a better game to watch. You asked me if the Ravens were a better team than the Bengals, and I said
on
paper, and I said they're maybe better by a smidgen. You could pull, you're pulling hairs, you're pulling strings here. I don't know. I just think in terms of like an established rivalry, I think Burrow versus Mahomes is a established rivalry.
I would agree with you. I agree with that 100%.
CBS was never going to give that one up.
It's funny. I was out in Arizona last week for a few days, and I jump in an Uber, and there's this guy. It's a driver, probably in my age, 50s, 60s. And we're sitting there talking. Hey, where are you from? Cincinnati. He's like, oh, man. He said, that Burrow guy. He said, it's the only guy that can beat Mahomes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's some guy in Arizona. He's like, Burrow's the only guy that can beat Mahomes. I hope Burrow's back healthy. You think that the Bengals are better than the Ravens?
After last year, no. I mean, there's no reason to think that the Bengals are a better team than them. The Bengals could hardly win a game in the division last year. So, from a viewer perspective, is a better game Ravens-Bengals? Probably. Ravens-Chiefs? Probably. But if you do want to factor in the Mahomes-Burrow argument, sure. But at the same time, from the overall football fans' perspective, I think the argument could be made that, hey, the Bengals did lose Tyler Boyd. Their Migos trio of receivers was kind of their second pitch along with Joe Burrow. So I'd probably go with a team like the Ravens, who had a better record, dominated the AFC last year for an opening game against the Chiefs, than a Bengals team who, they may have underperformed.
And you get the league MVP. I mean, say whatever you want. We all agree that Burrow's a better player, we think, than Lamar Jackson. But Lamar Jackson is the reigning most valuable player. So anyway, after all of this, the Bengals this year will play the Chiefs in Kansas City. Just won't be the opening game of the season. That'll be the Ravens and the Chiefs on September the 5th. The entire schedule is due to be released day after tomorrow. NBA playoffs, I got to tell you, they're pretty exciting. I only watch it because Luke says to watch it. I don't watch it. Are you watching it?
Hardly, Tom. I will pay attention when it gets down to the conference finals.
Yes, that's the next round.
I did talk to my brother-in-law, who's super big into the NBA. We had a couple different conversations about which teams are going to most likely make it to those finals. And, for me, my betting dollar is on the Nuggets or the Timberwolves, whoever wins that series. And man, I really like what the Knicks are doing. It's unfortunate that I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He got hurt. Their star Brunson. Yeah, that's right. Jalen Brunson. He got banged up earlier.
Yeah,
in
2
this
games
series.
ago.
Yeah.
Anybody came back in that game. That's a game they won in overtime. But Luke, you're all dialed in on this stuff. We have the defending champion Nuggets, as you talked about. They lost the first 2 games of that series against Minnesota at home.
Yeah.
Well, now they've gone on the road and they've won 2 straight. So now the way it works is you go 2-2, 1-1-1. So in a best of 7, right, this is going to go at least 6. We know that because they're 2-2. And the Game 5 is tomorrow night, but it's in Denver. So they'll go Denver, Game 5, Minnesota, Game 6, back to Denver, Game 7. Denver's not losing the series.
Well, I think that 3 of the 4 series, and we talked about how good the NBA playoffs have been, I mean, you can make the argument that Pacers-Knicks series, from a game-per-game perspective, is one of the best series we've seen in a long time, outside of, obviously, the NBA Finals and Eastern and Western Conference Finals. I mean, that series is insane. The only series that's kind of, and it's still 2-1 because the Cavs stole a game, but everybody wants to talk about Anthony Edwards, obviously Jokic, the Nuggets, defending champions. The Celtics are outright favored to win the entire NBA championship. So it's kind of one of those deals where almost like UConn, I would go as far as saying, in the NCAA tournament. Everyone want to talk about everybody else because of how good that one favorite is. And the East is, ultimately weaker than the West, but whoever comes out of that Knicks-Pacers series, and I got a feeling it's the Pacers because of how beat up the Knicks are. I mean, they got beat by 30 last night, and they couldn't even rest. Like, Miles McBride was in the garbage time group because they have no one else. Anunoby's hurt. They lost Robinson. They lost Bogdanovich. So everybody on the Knicks is hurt. So I think the Celtics will easily escape the Cavs. They've been over 8-point favorites in every single game, and then play one of the teams who went through an absolute gauntlet to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I'd say the Celtics will come out of the East. But from an NBA perspective as a whole, this is an unbelievable start to the playoffs.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's always intriguing when the big boys, so to speak, when they lose early in series to see if they can come back and win. Case in point being Denver. Now, Indiana, you mentioned them. They felt like they got jobbed in New York. Remember? They submitted literally the night after Game 2, that very night. They submitted close to 50 plays to the NBA Commissioner's Office about plays that were not called fairly. That's a lot of plays in 2 games. And you heard Rick Carlisle, their coach. He went off after the second game because the Knicks were going to the free throw line seemingly every trip down the floor. Big-time calls and big-time situations were going against the small market Pacers, against the big market Knicks. Well, you know what? They might be onto something here because the Pacers hammered New York by 32 yesterday to even that series at 2-2. Game 5 tomorrow night at Madison Square Garden. In golf, Rory McIlroy won for a record 4th time at Quail Hollow in Charlotte, North Carolina, firing a 65 in the final round to just boat race Xander Schauffele. They're just guys you know when the final round starts. I mean, God bless Xander Schauffele. He's had an incredible career. But you knew when the final round began yesterday, and Rory was, 4 behind Schauffele, 3 behind Schauffele, something like that? It was over.
Yeah. I mean, Xander Schauffele, it's really hard because you're honestly immature if you're going to go into the argument where Xander Schauffele isn't a established,
no doubt,
top tier. I mean, the guy doesn't miss cuts.
Yep.
There's some insane stat.
He's always in 100.
He plays into the weekend every week, but he is about the best Thursday, Friday golfer that there is on the PGA Tour. And it's not that something necessarily bad ever happens to Xander. He went bogey on the back yesterday, and that was amidst a stretch where Rory went birdie, birdie, eagle, par, birdie, birdie. He played 7 holes, 6 under par. So at the same time, Rory did run away with that tournament. And even if Xander played well, he wasn't going to catch Rory. When he's in form, no one's going to stop him. But it is one of those things where Xander, it's a difficult golf course in Quail Hollow. That's a President's Cup course. But that final pairing had a huge Ryder Cup feel with nobody else within 6 shots of those guys. And Xander couldn't even compete.
No.
In the last 5 holes, and he was favored up until hole 13 to win the whole thing.
I mean, the guy shoots 65. I mean, give it up to Rory McIlroy. And now, major number 2 is coming up this weekend, PGA. That's just down the road at Valhalla, and that will get started on Thursday. Then there's FC Cincinnati.
That's right, Tom.
I told you I had a chance. I ran into while we were walking our dogs. Right?
Right.
What a great dude, the head coach. Do they call them head coaches in soccer? Or do they call them managers? What do they call them?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I believe it's a manager.
Yeah, I believe it's manager. But yeah, Pat Noonan, though, he's a great dude.
Great dude. Did not know he lived just a few blocks from us. And he's out walking his dog with his wife. And we were out walking our dog, my wife Polly and me. And I ran into him and talked for about 15, 20 minutes. I'd always said, remember, even though we would make fun of soccer at times for some of the in-season stuff that goes on, I always told you I love Noonan's press conferences. He's the only coach in town that just lays it out there. Yep. When they're good, he'll say they're good. When they stink, he says they stink.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and his team, they got it done against our biggest rivals. I mean,
Hell is real.
Hell's real. They basically had control the entire game for the most part. I would say there towards the end, they made it a little interesting. Columbus Crew, they ended up getting that goal late in the game. But, man, when we find a weakness in your team, it feels like we just expose it over and over again. After the first goal, who was scored by Kelsey, one of the new
You're excited
acquired.
about Kevin Kelsey.
I am excited about Kevin Kelsey.
You were saying that FC Cincinnati did not have a guy like Kevin Kelsey early in the year. Young guy, spark, some offense, right?
That's right. And
Now they do.
Now they do. Now, who knows if we'll get to keep him for more than just this year. But regardless, he provided that spark, provided that offensive threat to where they started having to focus on him a little bit more. And that allowed Luciano Acosta to, 2 minutes later, get his goal, which was a fantastic goal, by the way. I wish I could pull that up for you. But, man, it was a beautiful game. You get it done at your rival's home stadium. You're now like firmly second on the table. Couldn't have been a better day for
Yeah, they're
FC.
only a couple points behind, I think it's Miami.
Yeah.
But, I mean, but so far, I think most people felt like that Columbus was having as good a year, if not better, than just about anybody in the entire league, right?
Right.
They played well in that tournament. The FC got bounced in the first round, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is. You start your season, then you go play a tournament.
Yeah, they beat the team that beat us that had our Brandon Vasquez. I can't remember what that tournament was called, but they played Montreal, I think, or Monterrey or something like that.
Close, Casey. I mean, what the Columbus Crew do, I have no idea, except when I just read that they're supposed to be really good. It's a great rivalry.
Yeah.
And FC Cincinnati comes out with a win in Columbus, Ohio.
The CONCACAF Champion Cup.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, we've got people that are all over that. Roger is all over that. Okay, let's get to the Crew are favored to win it. In fact, it says, Roger tells us, they're still favored to win this thing. All right, let's get to the Reds here. Okay. You know, the more and more that I look at this whole thing with the Reds, injuries are going to happen. Another fact of life is people are going to make mistakes. Okay? It doesn't matter who you are. Nobody is anywhere close to being perfect. The only person who was, they put him on a cross and drilled nails into his hands and feet. So people are going to make mistakes, and especially young people are going to make mistakes. Older people, we do too. I do. Guys older than me, everybody does. But young people, you know, and it's been proven scientifically, their brains are continuing to develop, even into their early and mid-20s. What I'm getting at here is that the more I look at this Reds team from a big picture standpoint, offensively and defensively, this whole thing that's occurring right now is because of Marte getting suspended.
Yeah.
Now, you can say McLean got hurt. You would be correct. You could say Friedel got hurt. You would be correct. Encarnacion Strand played the first month plus. He didn't do anything. I still think the guy's going to be a really good hitter. But he did not look good, and maybe it had something to do with a broken bone in his hand. And I'm not going to get into that whole thing about how that was played medically or how the Reds played that, because I'm not privy to what the hell's going on down there. So leave it be. But if you really stop and think about this team, if Marte is their everyday third baseman, and an argument can be made, even though he only played in the big leagues for less than a month last year, he might be the best hitter they have on the team. I'm just talking about putting the bat on the ball. De La Cruz is going to strike out a lot, and De La Cruz is going to hit a lot of home runs, going to steal a lot of base. He's by far their best player. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as far as just stepping to the plate, putting the bat on the ball. He ended the season with a long hitting streak, all that kind of thing, and then the PED thing in spring training. So what did that mean? Marte was supposed to play third. Candelario was supposed to play majority of the time at first. Okay? You have now where Candelario's forced to play third base. You've moved your third baseman of last year, Steer, to become an outfielder. And he's given it all he got. In spring training, you had India, who was supposed to be a backup player, was working on playing the outfield. That was a big deal in spring training, right? He was going to move around, left field, little third base, little second base, little DH. He's been forced to play every day, and I got to be honest, he's been exposed. They probably have hung on to India too long. Because I don't think anybody looks at India as an everyday player now. I could be wrong, and he's still young enough to change that sort of mindset. But just looking at him at the plate, we know about his deficiencies as a defender. I find it hard to believe that another team would look at him. But maybe for their team he fits. But it all starts with Marte and the domino effect of this entire thing this year and the way it's played out. But I'm not ready to throw in the towel. Casey, are you? I still think they have a chance to right the ship because their pitching's been so good.
Yeah, I mean, their pitching has been solid. I would say being 6 games under 500 with what's happened to the Reds, they're not that far off from where I expected them to be with all the injuries, with the suspension to Marte, and where they're at on their schedule. I mean, we knew this was going to be the hardest part of their schedule this season. And it's proven to be very difficult for them. Now, they've really yet to get into the meat and potatoes of that part of the hard part of their schedule. So that's a little discouraging. But there's been life. There's been signs of life. I think the majority of this losing streak or this time period where the Reds have really struggled has been on offense. And the last couple games, they've been scoring. It's not been, Well,
they're getting double digits in hits. They're scoring 4 and 5. I mean, that's like light years ahead of where they were going into Friday night's game. So they're getting guys on base, but I think, what was it, Luke, yesterday? 2 for what? Runners in scoring position?
2 of 12.
2 of 12.
Yeah, it's
and
tough.
they left how many? 13?
Double digits. I think it was 12.
12. I mean,
that's terrible.
It's not always how you hit, it's when you hit. And one of the reasons the Reds were 14 and 10, they didn't have a big-time batting average when they were 14 and 10. Big-time on-base percentage. They had Steer not going to cover off the ball, and everybody else was doing close to nothing. Benson's been just, beyond bad at the plate. Fraley's done well. But then he got sick, lost a bunch of weight. Encarnacion Strand, nothing. India, nothing. Ellie, Candelario, nothing until lately. Stevenson, nothing until a little bit lately. But they were getting the hit when they got the guys on base. And because of the running game, they get on base, steal a base, get in scoring position, get that one hit, bang, they get a run. But the pitching has been fantastic. To think that the starter tonight, Graham Ashcraft, has the highest ERA of that quintet in the rotation at 3.8 is unbelievable. Now, there are 2 ways to look at that. You can say they have blown, right? They have blown 1 month plus of fantastic starting pitching. And Hunter Green is really starting to pitch well. He's still got a couple things left for me to get over the top. His last start, every time the Reds scored, the next half inning, he gave up a run. Now, you can say, well, he went 6 innings, he gave up 3 runs, and looked good. But every time the Reds would score to either take the lead or tie the game, the very next half inning, Green would either allow the opposition to tie the game or take the lead. That's when you need your number one guy. Bang, bang, bang. 3 up, 3 down, get right back into plate, and here we go. So, but there are a lot of positives. I'm not going to go off on them, and in fact, I've got to get off here in just a second because we have, as you know, off the bench beginning at 10 o'clock. You'll be a part of that, right?
Of course.
Okay. Luke, you're going to be a part of that.
I think so. Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a question. This is a good question here. Kerry Reinert wants to know, how will fans react when Marte returns? Is all forgiven because they need him so badly? You went to the game the other night with your buddies. You sit in the stands. If Marte was back that night and they introduce, here comes the third baseman, Marte. Are you going to boo him? Are you going to cheer him? What are you going to do?
I think it's a no-brainer. You cheer for him when you have a guy that young with that much potential. It's like a completely different situation than take a Ryan Braun situation in Milwaukee, where like you have the legendary years, you build up a resume, and then you kind of. I mean, someone like Ryan Braun didn't have anything else left to give to Milwaukee, but it definitely put a stain on his career in time there.
Good point.
With a kid as young as him, I mean, Tatis was forgiven before you knew about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he came in, started playing a new position, and that was the only storyline with that. I think it'll be the same thing. But, Marte, he's extremely hyped up, and obviously he's not playing right now. That's his fault. He got in trouble. But at the same time, with how bad the Reds' team batting average is, 29th in the MLB, like sub 220, I think people are glorifying this kid a little too much because of how bad the organization needs him. It's
Good point.
He's going to be able to hit. And like you said, it's not a crazy take to say, hey, yeah, he might come in and be the most consistent and best bat-to-ball hitter on the team. However, I think that's more a testament to how bad the team has been in the batter's box. So they need him. They definitely will not boo him. I think that'd be insane. And nobody's going to the games right now anyway. So
and the thing everybody forgets, it's a great take there, especially the Braun thing. But again, he comes back, he plays the rest of the season, and if you're lucky enough to get in the postseason, he can't play.
It's tough. Yeah,
and I saw where McLean has come out and said he expects to return in August. I hope that's accurate. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it, but I sure hope it's true because I like the kid. He's a gamer. He's a player. He might be their best player, at least in the short amount of time we saw last year.
Yeah.
Because remember now, it was roughly this week last year when McLean was brought up. He was brought up the second week, beginning of I think May the 15th, if I'm not mistaken, of last year. Ellie doesn't show up till June.
That's right.
So, last year you felt like you had some sort of something to really look forward to. That we know De La Cruz is coming. We know this McLean kid is coming. We know all, there's some stuff happening with this Marte guy, all this kind of thing going on. This year, it's sort of similar. You've got Marte coming back. You're hoping that McLean is coming back. Unfortunately, Friedel. Oh, it's 10 o'clock. I got to get out of here. It's time for the boys, right?
It's time.
It's time for the boys and off the bench. Lukey, thank you. Good luck today.
Thank you.
Case, always a pleasure, buddy.
Always, Tom.
Hardest working man in television. Casey McCollister. Rocky, thank you for the kind words. This was fun. We're back Friday at noon. And off the bench, Trace is coming in, Reed's coming in, Elliott's coming in. I don't know if Jeremiah's coming in. This is like going to be kumbaya in here in about 3 minutes from now. So off the bench, here we go.